There are so many fun things we all can do to be healthier, no matter who you are or where you are. So let's move.
Oh, here we go.
Let's stretch in the grass.
What a play!
Let's play tag.
Wow, unbelievable.
Let's jump up and down.
Oh, what a way to finish it.
And most of all, let's eat better so that we have the energy we need to play an hour a day, every day.
Everyone can play. Just go to letsmove.gov to learn more.
In Fairfield County, something new comes across my desk every day. Crimes are committed, cases are solved, and a community is made safe by the hardworking employees of the Fairfield County Sheriff's Office.
Welcome to This Week with Sheriff Dave Phalen, a weekly program here on LSN Television. We're also carried by a number of our radio affiliates in Lancaster and beyond. Do appreciate you, the viewers and listeners that join us each and every week, and certainly the students at Fairfield Christian Academy that put this program together, J.T. Bertram and the gang. Our executive producer, Kelly Roberts, actually lines the guests up, gets a lot of the questions, does the background, does a terrific job behind the scenes. Great guest for the next couple weeks is Prosecutor Gregg Marx. Welcome.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.
And Greg and I actually went to the same high school.
It really is amazing how many people went to Eastmore High School that have had significant law enforcement roles in this county, because Prosecutor David Landefeld also went to Eastmore High School, as does my chief criminal assistant, Jeff Hunter. Jeff was a classmate of mine, and we graduated in 1973. So 4 significant law enforcement people at least are from Eastmore High School.
Yeah, and Eastmore High School was the east side of Columbus, Ohio. And, you know, I think back on that time, Eastmore was really kind of a unique school because there was a tremendous amount of diversity. You had people with money, people that were poor, people from different religious backgrounds, different races, but we all seemed to get along pretty well, didn't we?
We were very lucky during school, and of course, unfortunately, neither the sheriff or I is the most famous alumni from Eastmore High School, because that was Archie Griffin's.
That's right. My brother played football with him.
Isn't that great?
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about your background, and then we'll get into some of the things that the prosecutor's office does here in the county.
Well, when I was a young high school student, my father said I could go to any state school in Columbus. So that meant I went to Ohio State University, and I was a very diligent student as a young person, graduated college in 3 years, and was fortunate to be accepted by the Ohio State University Law School.
Okay.
After law school, my first job was in legal aid. I started in Newark very briefly and then was transferred to Lancaster. I loved Lancaster. I met my wife Carol in law school, and we moved to Lancaster, and I worked with legal aid for 3 years, establishing new offices in Logan and Circleville. And at some point there became an opening on the prosecutor's office, so I applied and was fortunate enough that Mr. Landefeld accepted me. I started working for the Fairfield County Prosecutor's Office December 15th, 1982, and I'm still there. So
Wow.
I must love what I'm doing.
Lots of changes.
Yes, very much so. When we started, David and I were both part-time. There were no full-time attorneys. Now we have a staff of 13 attorneys. Almost all of them are full-time, and we all have too much work to do. That's how much crime there is now.
And you know, if you look at even the types of kind of offenses you probably prosecuted back then, it's probably changed.
Very much so. We have at least 80% of our crimes are either drug or alcohol related or both, and certainly it wasn't as severe a problem in the 80s.
Yeah. So a lot of our viewers and listeners may not exactly know all the responsibilities of the prosecutor's office. Would you mind sharing a few of those with us?
Certainly. Our office is responsible for all the elected officials within the county. Now, not city elected officials, but all the county elected officials. We help the libraries, we help the school boards, we help all the department heads in the county. Then we also do all the juvenile cases and all the adult felony cases. Believe it or not, there are 6,000 homes in Columbus that are part of Fairfield County. So
Right.
when there's crimes in those homes, those are our cases too. We work a lot also with Pickerington and, of course, Lancaster, and periodically Baltimore, Amanda. There are just a lot of small communities we help.
Yeah, I remember. That's interesting you would mention that, because they had the Columbus police officer out there on Tussing Road involved in that shooting, and that actually came back to you, although it was within the Columbus Police Department, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was really amazing, and it's, as we started, several of the Columbus police officers had never testified before the case came to Fairfield County, because there's a lot more plea negotiations in Franklin County typically.
Right.
And they like the fact that our office is willing to go to trial.
Why is that? And I kind of know the answer, but because I actually came from the Columbus Police Department before I was the sheriff, and you're right, per the number, there is a lot more plea bargaining within Franklin County as opposed to Fairfield County. What would be some of the reasons for that?
A lot of it is simply just the caseload.
Yeah.
And they have, I think, 16 judges in Common Pleas Court now. We have 2.
Right.
We're fortunate in that statewide, only 2% of the cases went to trial in 2013. In Fairfield County, it was 5%.
Wow.
My office is trying cases, and that's one reason why I think the law enforcement community in Fairfield County, I hope, is happy with our office. I've hired a lot of dedicated assistants that are willing to go to trial. And when I do that interview, I tell them I want them trying the cases where a victim's been hurt unless we receive a satisfactory plea agreement.
And so you're a mentor to a lot of these newer attorneys once they join the office. All these are young people, and they're just getting started.
Yes, I've been doing that all my life, not necessarily deliberately, but Mr. Landefeld permitted me to hire law clerks in the early 90s. I've worked with more than 100 law students in my career, almost all of which have become very successful attorneys. I'm hiring and training some really good people because our Attorney General hired Melissa Schiffel and Jocelyn Kelly from our office, and then Jeff Porter was just hired away by our county commissioners to work as the county human resource director. So 3 of my really good people have been hired away, but I still have a lot of good people, and I'm going to find more.
And you have some law students now that are interning or working in your office, which is at no cost to the county, right?
Somehow I have 6 law students that are helping. They're working on incredible cases, doing really important work. Last year I had 4 law students that volunteered. I've even had some volunteer attorneys for short time periods. I'm very conscious of trying to save our tax dollars.
Right. You know, when we think about some cases and people see things on television, that's kind of their experience. Most people haven't been involved in the criminal justice system. So what are some of the things when you have a major case that needs to be done, or the way you prepare for these cases?
So much depends on how effective and proactive law enforcement is. And that's why we're so fortunate that your department and the city police have experienced detectives. You don't have enough. We could use 2 or 3 times as many, but we work with them very intently. We try to meet with them early on in the case, and we have to fairly evaluate whether a juror will become firmly convinced that a crime has been committed and that we have the right person charged.
You know, I often, and I've shared this before on this program, when you have like some of the larger cities, whether it's Cleveland, Cincinnati, Columbus, you'll have detectives that are, all they do is homicides, or all they do is bad checks, or stolen cars. So that's all they do. But within Lancaster or the county, these guys do everything from the bad check to the double homicide.
And it really is amazing. Detective Nicoya and Detective Roberts were the lead detectives in our last case. They were even getting assigned cases during our 8-day murder trial, and we would try to talk to them about that. And part of our job as the prosecutor is to analyze the particular detective, and we might see, for instance, Brian Kohler. I've had a lot of cases with him.
Right.
There are certain cases that he does extremely well. He's very good in burglary type cases. He's very good in murder cases. He's good at virtually everything. But we have to always know our detective to see, is this somebody we can rely on? And fortunately, nearly everybody we can.
So there's some detectives that have strengths in certain investigations, and others that maybe would be better to have somebody else handle?
Occasionally.
Is that fair to say?
Occasionally.
Yeah, well, that's good for me to know. I might want to even find that out, and so we make sure we do those assignments appropriately. A lot of times today, I think, with all the crime shows on television and the Datelines and the 48 Hours and the CSI and Nancy Grace, all these shows, how does that make the job more difficult for you, or is it easier?
It's at least interesting. One of the things that I train and lecture on a lot, and I lecture for the Ohio Prosecuting Attorneys Association also. I like to train a lot of people. We do a lot of training, but there's something called the CSI effect. So as we're picking the jury, I will always ask how many jurors watch CSI or NCIS, and frequently, especially if there's a case where we don't have DNA evidence, I will ask, is there anyone on this jury that would never believe that the state met its burden of proof if they don't have DNA evidence?
Right.
So I get them to commit that they'll fairly evaluate the case, because lots of times if you have enough eyewitnesses or if you have a believable confession,
right,
you do not necessarily need DNA evidence. Plus, on television, they get their test results in about 10 minutes. No laboratory analyst works that quickly in real life.
So well, that's interesting. So I guess in some ways, there's a higher expectation from jurors just based on fictional things they've seen on television, when in reality, there's not always DNA.
Right.
In fact, maybe most of the time. Or what? I guess what would be the percentage?
Well, part of it is we probably get some DNA or fingerprint evidence in 25 to 50% of the cases.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
However, when you have it, not many of those cases go to trial, because they realize that, especially if it's also different percentages. I've had cases where there were the odds that somebody else could have left that DNA is 1 in 10 billion.
Right.
Well, we don't have that many people on our planet, so I like our chances. There was a recent murder case in October that was actually within the city of Columbus, and the defendant, who was a lad living in Cleveland, left his blood in the victim's home, and there was no reason for his blood to be there, and it was 1 in 240 million. You know, the jury ultimately believed that we'd proven our case that he committed burglary because there was no reason for him to be in that man's bedroom.
Right, right. So these are big cases, and I know a lot of old cases through DNA today have been solved.
Correct. And we frequently get something from the Bureau of Criminal Identification saying that there's a match on this person's DNA, and that's very helpful. One of the most important cases that people know about involved the death of Stacey Fairchild.
Right.
And that case was ultimately solved via DNA. There was a robbery at the Network 10 on West Fair Avenue, and the person robbed the victim, and somehow she got away from him and ran to Gypsy Joe's, which back then was on West Fair. And there was a man in Gypsy Joe's, a very brave man by the name of Kevin Numbers, big man. He went back to the Network 10 and followed and chased the defendant. Well, the defendant left some blood on the door at Network 10, and Bobby Joe Kennedy, who's a famous BCI analyst, found his blood, and it matched something left in Stacey's body.
Wow. You know what?
That's incredible.
We're almost out of time. Let's start next week. We'll talk a little bit about that and maybe some other cases you've had. And I appreciate you being with us.
Thank you very much, Sheriff.
Prosecutor Gregg Marx will be back next week. Make sure you tune in next week, because I think it's going to be a very interesting show as Prosecutor Gregg Marx shares some cases that he's been directly involved in. Very interesting cases. The clock on the wall says we've got to go. Until next week, same time, same place. Sheriff Dave Phalen. God bless, and we'll see you right here next week.
When it comes to choosing a school, parents who want the best education for their students look for academic excellence, skilled teachers, a safe school that encourages their values. Students want a school with competitive athletics, unique opportunities, and friendships that last a lifetime. Fairfield Christian Academy, the place where parents and students agree. Enrolling now at fairfieldchristianacademy.com.